The GOAT has got himself a new job. Not really that surprising to most of us in the college football world, but still, got Nick Saban on College Game Day, dude. That is going to be absolutely awesome. Welcome into the Hard Count, the People's College Football Show. We talk college football every single day right here on this platform on the On3 YouTube channel. So one, make sure you're subscribed. Two, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram at JD Pacella. Want to hear from y'all, just in general, want to hear from y'all throughout the course of this entire winter into spring and into the summer, into the fall, because that is obviously the lifeblood of this show. It is February 8th, 2024, the last one on the face of this planet. And guess what? It's the last one in this studio. The next time you see us live on the air, we'll be in some new digs at our new office a little bit closer to downtown Nashville, but we'll get a little bit sappy later on this show. So we won't do that right now, but we will get sappy a little bit later. We got a lot to talk about. National Signing Day was yesterday. If you tuned into our live Signing Day show on the On3 Recruits channel, we appreciate you. If you tuned into the Hard Count post-Signing Day on this channel, we appreciate you for that too. Like I said, we got a lot to jump into, and none of it has to do with Signing Day. We got some recruiting talk for Oregon, which we'll get to here in a little bit. One of you asked a great question about the future of Oregon recruiting, if they could eventually maybe even be a leader in recruiting when it comes to those class rankings. We'll talk about that. There's been a lot of noise, which I think is probably the best verb to put to it, or the best word, the best verbiage rather to put to it. This whole Kirk Herbstreit, Dylan Raiola conversation around Dylan Raiola's dad talking about him and Kirk Herbstreit's conversation. We'll get to that in just a second here because I have some feelings on that. Andy Staples On3 is a show on this very On3 YouTube channel, and he had a conversation with Kirk Herbstreit that was off the air, but he talked about it on the air last night on his show, and it brought some really good context to that whole discussion. So we'll give you a little bit more of our feel there. We won't spend too much time on it. We'll talk about that a little bit. Now, I want to talk about Nick Saban taking the game day desk, because I think there's more to that when it meets the eye. Had one of you also ask me about Florida State and their ceiling when it comes to 2024 with DJ U running the show. So as you can tell, we got a lot to get into here. It's February, and we're still going to talk about college football for an entire hour. And it's not just us making up things to talk about. We actually have real things to get to that we need to discuss as a college football community. So make sure you're locked in. Last Thursday of the week, control your attitude, control your effort. You take a mental vacation here for the next hour. Got a lot on your plate. It's just college football, so we appreciate y'all being dialed in. Let's get right to it. Okay. Had some of you get at me on Twitter yesterday and say, JD, what are your thoughts on this Dylan Raiola, Kirk Herbstreit situation? And at first I was like, what are you talking about? How can we possibly have a conversation about that? So to set the background a little bit here, Dylan Raiola's father, Dominic Raiola, played football at Nebraska. Also played football in the NFL. Really good when he was at Nebraska. He does an interview. And during the interview, he talked about a conversation he had with Kirk Herbstreit. And the way that Dominic Raiola framed it was Kirk Herbstreit reached out to him, the way that Dominic Raiola tells it. And basically the reaching out was when there was smoke around Dylan Raiola maybe flipping from Georgia to Nebraska. Again, this is how it was told. And in the interview, this is where the friction kind of happens, is Dominic Raiola says that Kirk Herbstreit said, man, tell him he's got to do it. And so, again, that's the way it was told in the interview. Andy Staples provided some context on his show last night after talking to Kirk Herbstreit, which I think is probably a little bit more in line with what actually happened. But that obviously sparked a lot of feelings across the internet and across message boards, and people saying, is Kirk Herbstreit telling kids to flip? No, that is, and I do not believe that is what happened, and that is not what sounds like happened. I mean, let's kind of reset this whole conversation. If something seems off, if something seems like maybe it doesn't totally smell right, like Kirk Herbstreit telling kids to flip their commitment or encouraging kids to flip their commitment, that doesn't really smell right, does it? Doesn't really seem like a real thing that would happen. Usually that's probably in line with what actually happened. If it doesn't smell right, it probably isn't right. Andy Staples, in his show last night, talks about calling Kirk Herbstreit this week, having a conversation with him, and the way that it went down is there was a conversation between Dominic Raiola and Kirk Herbstreit. That much is true, but it was more so a casual father-to-father conversation, and Dominic Raiola asked Kirk Herbstreit from Andy Staples' show last night, he said, how much should I talk to him about the opportunity to bring a place like Nebraska back to relevance in college football? And Kirk Herbstreit, again, per the Andy Staples On3 show last night, said, yeah, that'd be cool. Like, yeah, sure, that's a factor. I think that's a lot closer to what actually happened. Like, again, if it seems off, it probably is off. Like, is it more likely that Kirk Herbstreit has this agenda against Georgians trying to flip one of their top guys to go to Nebraska? Or is it more likely there was just a conversation between two dads and there was a casual discussion around how cool it would be, how cool of an opportunity it is for Dylan Raiola to get back there, and Dominic Raiola asked Kirk Herbstreit's opinion on it? Like, I think that's a lot more in line with the reality. And the thing I want to get to here, again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but let's just kind of breeze through this. This kind of breaks the narrative that a lot of people have about ESPN and Kirk Herbstreit. Like, this is the same guy that folks were shouting at the top of their lungs had an agenda for the SEC to get them in the college football playoff. When Bama got it over Florida State, they're saying Kirk Herbstreit was somehow in cahoots making that happen. This doesn't match up with that. This narrative goes against that narrative pretty directly. Those things can't both be true, right? The other narrative, oh, well, he's in it for the TV money. He's just trying to, get the big brands in the TV, and that's what he's trying to do here. Again, Nebraska is in the Big Ten Conference. ESPN does not have the media rights to the Big Ten. They don't. So this doesn't benefit Kirk Herbstreit at all where Dylan Raiola goes to Nebraska. What I think, again, this is just my opinion on this thing, outside looking in, I think Kirk Herbstreit has a lot of respect for Matt Rule and the way that he does things. I think Kirk Herbstreit loves college football as a whole, and I think Nebraska getting up off the mat would just be a good thing for college football. I think most people would agree with that opinion. And so I don't think Kirk Herbstreit is funneling in recruits to Nebraska. I think it was a casual conversation that was taken out of context. There's lack of context in that interview. So that's my 2 cents on that. I do not believe that Kirk Herbstreit is talking to any recruits and saying, hey, you should flip to Nebraska. Also, Kirk Herbstreit's an Ohio State grad. Okay, Ohio State and Nebraska go at it on the football field. Why would there be any incentive to help a school in your this whole thing just makes no sense from the jump. Do not believe this is the case. So if we're having a meltdown about it on a message board and saying Kirk Herbstreit's messing with your recruits, that's not what's happening. That's not reality. It's not that deep. Let's move on. Not that deep, fam. That's kind of the sentiment I want to make sure we get to there, all right? So let's keep on rolling here. Now, speaking of College Game Day and Kirk Herbstreit and ESPN, College Game Day getting the biggest transfer portal acquisition, I think, of this entire portal cycle. Now, Alabama's portal window closes tomorrow night, but Nick Saban is headed to College Game Day. All right, now College Game Day for us as college football fans is how we start our college football Saturdays, right? Like this is, I believe, as important in some respects to a college football Saturday as the game's actually being played. When you see Lee Corso, Kirk Herbstreit, Desmond Howard, and now Pat McAfee on your TV, you know there's about to be some football being played. And so this isn't wildly surprising that Nick Saban is joining College Game Day, because there was a report that came out in 2022 that after the Kick 6 game where Alabama lost to Auburn, Nick Saban at least entertained the idea of moving to ESPN, and more specifically the idea of joining College Game Day. And obviously with Nick Saban being who he is, College Game Day would be a tremendous fit for him. But I want to make sure we say this. This is a massive win for the college football community. Massive win. One, this is going to be elite television. Okay, because when you think about it, college football coaches, at the very core of what they do as jobs, not factoring in NIL, not factoring in the transfer portal, they are motivators and they are teachers, right? Nick Saban, I don't think there's a question, is the greatest college football head coach of all time. The numbers and the trophies indicate as much. So with that being the case, we can assume then pretty fairly that Nick Saban is one of the greatest teachers, one of the greatest motivators of all time. And now we get him talking college football to us every fall Saturday for 3-ish hours. That's going to be awesome. Also, it's worth noting, I think Saban is actually pretty freaking hilarious. Like during those little those press conferences, he's had some good quips, like the whole, y'all fed us some rat poison, and it was actually pretty yummy this week. That was a bar. Talking about, you should see the other guy when he showed up to a press conference with his face a little bit beat up from, I don't know what it was, but I just thought he's got a great personality for television, and I think we're going to get to see more of that when he joins Game Day. And we also get him, I think, totally peeling the curtain back, too. Like, I don't think it's a thing where Nick Saban's going to be guarded and try and, be too cautious with the things that he says. Like, at this point, this is now Nick Saban's job. Andy Staples said as much on his show last night. Like, some coaches get into television with the idea they're eventually going to get back to coaching, so they kind of try and, walk lightly around some topics. I don't think that's Nick Saban. I think he's going to let it rip, and I think it's going to be absolutely phenomenal. Also, it makes all the sense in the world just from a what you would expect from Nick Saban point of view. And I don't mean from Nick Saban taking a College Game Day job. I mean, like, Nick Saban is an elite person, period. That's how he lives his life. That's the way that he goes about his business, whether it be from a coaching standpoint and now from a broadcasting standpoint. But we get this, like, elite people, they only really have one speed. There's only really one way that Nick Saban knows how to do things, and that's at the highest level. That's what Nick Saban's walking into here at College Game Day. Nick Saban isn't going out and taking a halftime show job. And Nick Saban's not going to drop in on College Football Live for a little 5-minute hit and call that his broadcasting career. Nick Saban is attacking the college football staple that is College Game Day, that is a tradition to all of us in the college football world, and he's going to attack it full speed, head on. And I can't wait for it. I can't wait for it. So in that sense, it makes a ton of sense, and I think it's going to make a ton of great television. Also, I love this for College Game Day. Like, I'll put my hand up and be the first one to say I'm a College Game Day stan. I was before I got into this business. I have been since I've gotten into this business. I remember my earliest memories as a kid, before Pop Warner football games. Those games were always absurdly early for whatever reason. I feel like they were like a 10 a.m. kick. Regardless, I would get up early because I couldn't sleep being in grade school and knowing I had a game in a few hours. So I would walk downstairs, prop myself on the couch on that Saturday morning and watch College Game Day, and that was my first introduction into college football. Like, this is a part of all of us now. So the desk now, people have kind of talked about it's lost its fastball and big noon's kind of catching up. Like, if that was ever the case, not going to be the case anymore, especially with Nick Saban joining the desk. So you got Desmond Howard doing his thing. You got Reese Davis, who I think is the best host in television, regardless of sports or otherwise. You got Kirk Herbstreit, who's the greatest of all time when it comes to college football analysts. You got Pat McAfee bringing absurd juice for the entire desk. You got Lee Corso, the icon of the headgear. And now you put the greatest of all time from the college football head coaching standpoint, Nick Saban, on that desk. Like, it's a wrap. Game, set, match. Okay, that's going to be must-see TV each and every week. Here's what I'm curious about, too. If Nick Saban gets to a position where, like, it's obvious, hey, Bama's not the pick here. Let's say Bama's lining up against Georgia in September, and Bama's had a lackluster start. Not saying they lost some games, but saying they just don't look like the team to pick. Is Nick Saban going to pick against Alabama? Is that going to be a thing that we see at some point in time here in the near future? Because that in itself would be a storyline, I think. It would be kind of wild to see. So that's going to be compromising in some sense, I have to believe, for Nick Saban to have to pick against his former team with guys that he still knows on that roster. Also, there was this thought that, and this is going down the rabbit hole too much, so I don't want to go too far this direction, but there was this thought for a while there. Not this thought for a while. I'll rephrase that. James Cook, former running back at the University of Georgia, now with Buffalo Bills, was quoted saying, like, he believes that ESPN put Bama in the playoff because they knew Nick Saban was retiring. Again, conspiracy theory. It's not that deep. It never was that deep. Regardless, we move on. But if that was the case, if there was some kind of agenda because they knew Nick Saban was retiring, why would they not leave them out and then allow him to make this announcement earlier and get this deal done earlier and allow him to start? Heck, you could have made him on the College Game Day crew for New Year's Day. Heck, you could have put him on the College Game Day set for the national championship game or something like that. Like, you could have maybe expedited this thing along and maybe gotten a little bit more practice, a little more reps under your belt. Regardless, I just think that's another narrative buster when it comes to the college football rumor mill. But Nick Saban joining Game Day will be cinema. I think it's great for the game. I think it's great for the college football community from the product we'll get. And as a College Game Day stan, I mean, the Game Day fastball has gone absolutely nowhere. So that's going to be awesome. That's going to be absolutely awesome, and we can't wait for it. But, yeah, some headlines in the college football media world yesterday. So let's move right along here. Appreciate everybody that's dialed in live. We appreciate y'all for that. Every single offseason, Bill Connolly of ESPN does his returning production rankings across the college football landscape, and he has a formula he puts together to kind of hone in on certain position groups having more emphasis than others when it comes to teams coming back to players coming back to their respective schools. But he released his returning production rankings for 2024, and I think it's kind of fascinating when you look at some of these teams and where they rank. To provide some context now, last year Florida State was number 1. They obviously went undefeated. Michigan was top 5 last year. They won the whole darn thing. I want to put a disclaimer on this, though. Returning production does not equate to good production. It means you're back in your experience, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're somehow going to be successful because you have the same right guard back from last season. Well, that right guard actually allowed 3 sacks a game. So maybe that's not who you want returning. So just food for thought, something to keep an eye on. But Virginia Tech is the number 1 team in returning production heading into 2024. Now, for the record, Virginia Tech, they finished the season hot. 5-2 with a Military Bowl victory over Tulane. The ACC to me feels very much so wide open. I'm not calling my shot for Virginia Tech, but I do think if they can pick up where they left off and kind of keep that momentum with all this returning production they have on their roster, might be worth taking an extra look at the Hokies in Blacksburg, all right? It might be something to keep an eye on. Nebraska's at number 3 in these returning production rankings. 76% of the offense is back. I have to believe they're going to upgrade at quarterback with Dylan Raiola. Now, depending on how he acclimates to the college system and if he actually ends up winning the job, that's obviously going to be a factor. But they ran for over 175 yards a game last season. 76% of that production is back. That's a good sign. 78% back on defense, I think, is a bigger deal. That defense allowed 18 points a game. You turn on the tape, and I understand the Big Ten wasn't always a juggernaut offensively, but look, man, like the black shirts, man, they were swarming around. They were getting downhill with bad intentions whenever they saw a perimeter screen or whenever they read run. Like that was a defense that played fast consistently, and more importantly, outside of that production being back, their defensive coordinator is back in Tony White, a guy who I believe could have taken a head coaching job this past offseason should the right one have presented itself. Big. Very big for the folks in Lincoln that he's back. Now, I want to say this. With them being number 3 in returning production, having the season they had, having another year now to get some standards in place, get some more familiarity with Matt Rule's way of doing things, this is the year. This is the year for Nebraska. This is the year they go bowling. All right? I know you've been hurt many times through different expectations in the past. You thought last year was the year. You thought the year before that was the year because I told you so. I'm telling you right now. It's all in place. It's all in place. First year, you're kind of getting your way of doing things down. The second year from Matt Rule, you learn how to win. Nebraska, I believe, will learn how to win in 2024. I'm not saying they win the Big Ten. I'm not saying they play for a New Year's Six Bowl, but I am telling you right here, 6-6, I believe, is attainable and will be attained in 2024. Our first prediction of 2024 is out there now, so let's rock with it. Number 4, you got Oklahoma State. 77% of their total production is back. This is a squad now that played for a Big 12 title last year. And let's just call a spade, man. The Big 12, still going to be a good conference. You lose the most talented rosters in that conference in Oklahoma and Texas gone to the SEC. Texas obviously winning the conference a season ago. I think Oklahoma State will very much so be a player in that conference yet again this year. Having that much experience back from a team that played as well as they did last year. Ollie Gordon carrying the mail for you like FedEx, I think that's a good deal. It's a very, very good deal. Speaking of the SEC, Texas A&M, they check in at number 18 on this returning production list. 72% rather, of the total production is back. 77% on offense. That's a big deal. Say what you want about what the offense didn't accomplish last year. They still averaged 33 points a game. Now, I know the team went 7-5. It's not what you strive for. But I think having this much production back total, I think it just further emphasizes the point that this is not going to be a reset year for Mike Elko and company. This is not going to be a year where you kind of, okay, let's all sort of figure out where we are on this team. Let's kind of figure out who we're going to be, establish our identity. Like that would be the case if you didn't have some Jimmies and Joes to work with. They do have that in College Station. They do have some guys that you can win with right now. So with that being the case, expectations, they are not dialing back at all, and they shouldn't. More power to them. Now, Alabama's at number 115. Out of 134. And before we panic and before we say there's something wrong with Bama and Nick Saban leaving and all this, like, yes, that's the reality. 134 teams, so number 115 isn't the worst, but it's not great. Last year, Alabama checked in at 125. Okay, so Alabama's actually, if you want to be real here, up 10 spots from a season ago. Now, they did lose a lot of players through the portal. There's no way around that. Lose some players to the NFL. No way around that. But what's left on the roster, while it's inexperienced, it's still very talented and very capable of winning in the SEC. Reason for that being, they've recruited really well. You say, well, they transferred out. This guy transferred. I'm not saying they didn't, but I'm saying since 2020, here's the recruiting classes for Alabama. Second in the country in 2020, first since 2021, second since 2022, first in 2023, second in 2024. So 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I'm not saying they have the most experience. In fact, this list is saying almost the opposite. But to say they're not talented and not capable in 2024 to win a lot of ball games is just false. So Kalen DeBoer will still have some ingredients to work with. Alabama at 115, but that's 10 spots up from where they were last year. And, of course, they won the SEC and made the college football playoff. So think of that as you want. Michigan at number 128. Again, out of 134. They bring back a total of 36% production, 24% on offense, 47% on defense. So that's a little bit more encouraging. And the numbers don't reflect the fact there's still some really good pieces there. Mason Graham is back. Will Johnson's back. Colston Loveland's back. Donovan Edwards is back, who I believe has more in the tank than what you got to see this year. The national title game, I think, probably put us all on notice as to what kind of player he is, or maybe reminded a lot of us what kind of player he is, because Blake Corum kind of saw a heavier share of the load this year. People talk about Michigan from 2023 as a team that's extremely deep. Like that was what you heard all year long from opposing coaches. Really talented, really deep. Well, a lot of those guys that provide that depth on the roster from last year, they might have played a smaller role in 2023 in that national title run. They're going to take over as a starting role in 2024. So while you have guys that aren't as experienced and you lose J.J. McCarthy, that's massive. You lose Blake Corum. Obviously, you lose Jim Harbaugh. But like the thing with Michigan, the thing that I think is exciting about them in 2024, what they did last year formulaically from a gameplay standpoint, I think that's pretty repeatable. I'm not calling my shot for them to win the national title, but I think what they're built in was depth, which will now take center stage, and that depth is developed. Okay, so they're a developmental program. That's who they are, and a lot of those guys will have had now a full offseason heading into the fall to develop even further, find their new role. Michigan at number 128. It's kind of alarming when you see that, but I don't think Michigan's taking this massive step back and going to fall off the face of the earth and miss a bowl game. I don't think that's the case. So a lot to unpack there. Again, there's 134 teams in FBS. 134. That's just a few of them. A couple of teams that jumped out to us looking at those returning production rankings. That means we're that much closer to actual ball being played with this list coming out. So we obviously love that. We're big fans of that. Again, Bill Connolly does awesome work for ESPN and a lot of good insight to be taken from those returning production rankings. We referred to those returning production rankings last year legitimately like probably once a week, if not more. I think there's a lot to be taken from those. It's not a correlation to success, but I think it does matter when it comes to college football and when it comes to your experience factor. It means something. Now, speaking of experience, speaking of maybe a team that has a desire to play for a national title in 2024, one of you hit me up on Twitter, Ryan. He says, do you think Oregon will ever be a leader in recruiting in the upcoming years? So the way that I'm interpreting this is Ryan is saying, do you think Oregon can have a number one ranked recruiting class at some point in the future? I'll tell you about it in a second, but if you're watching this as a one-off video, we appreciate you for that. But this is part of a live show on the On3 YouTube channel called The Hard Count. We talk college football every single day, live Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a minute of the college football content we got coming for you. Once you're a part of this, we appreciate you in advance for being a part of it, all right? Now, for Oregon, I think the obstacle for them to have a number one ranked class is what it's always been. The location of Eugene, Oregon is not necessarily in the backyard of some of the best talent in the country. It's not dunking on the state of Oregon. It's just a fact that there's really good talent and a lot of talent in the state of Texas, in the state of Georgia, Florida, California. I understand that's closer than those states, but like that's still a plane flight away. So location has always been the obstacle for Oregon. But look at what they've done since Dan Lanning's been there. In 2023, number 7 class. In 2024, they just wrapped up a top 5 class, number 4 class in the country for Oregon. So they're cooking right now. They got momentum. What I want to say about Oregon, them having, Oregon having a number 1 ranked recruiting class is more of a conversation right now than it ever has been. The reason for that being, they have everything they need to succeed in the acquiring talent side of things in college football in the modern era. Everything they need. Very well resourced. That's been well documented. Everyone likes to make jokes about Uncle Phil and Nike. Like, say what you want. It's real. It's real. Oregon is a very well-resourced operation. I don't think that's a secret. Other part, they have real momentum. New Year's Six Bowl victory last season. They have a head coach who has made it extremely clear he is locked in. Grass is extremely green in Eugene, and he's not worried about going anywhere else. Alabama was an opening. Whether he was offered the job or not, he made it clear, I'm not going nowhere. Okay, so that does something when it comes to acquiring talent. I mean, it provides some security at the high school level, at least, to know who I commit to out of high school. I feel relative confidence he will still be there when I graduate or when I leave for the NFL, whichever happens first. You have a head coach and a staff. That's the most important part. They've got an SEC mentality when it comes to the recruiting side of things. And it's one thing to say we care about recruiting. Yeah, we want to get the best players, but like, look at this staff. Tosh Lapoy, Dan Lanning, they have an SEC background. From the Nick Saban tree, at least, is Dan Lanning. Like, that's what he comes from. That's what he knows. That has been bred into him as a head coach in college football. He knows to win football games at the highest level, to compete at the highest level, we have to have the best players. You can have the great scheme. That's important. You got to have that. But to win how we want to win here at Oregon, we got to have the best talent. So what I'm trying to say here is it's a priority to Dan Lanning and company. It's a priority to this staff to recruit at the top level. Like number one class, I would have to believe, whether they would tell you or not, I believe that's a goal for them in the future. I believe it, and I think, again, based on how they're built right now and where we are in modern college football, that's more attainable than ever before. Now, here's the great ace up the sleeve for Oregon. Here's why I think this is, again, more of a conversation now than maybe it would have been 5-10 years ago. The brand of Oregon has always been tremendous. Always been tremendous, but especially this era we're in right now with a lot of these kids that are either in college or about to enter into college. Oregon, for them, the snapshot in their mind is Oregon being a football school. It wasn't always that way. It is right now. These guys, they remember Marcus Mariota winning the Heisman, D'Anthony Thomas putting out an and one hoop mixtape, it felt like, every single Saturday, making dudes look silly, playing for Rose Bowls, playing for national championships, being in the college football playoff. You understand where we're coming from there. Oregon has been relevant in the college football world for the majority of these college football players or soon-to-be college football players' lives. That matters. So the brand has always been there. It's always been attractive with Nike and with the cool jerseys. It's always kind of had a swag to it, an aura to it. But on top of that, outside of these kids seeing Oregon, and for some of these kids aspiring to be at Oregon at some point in time based on what they saw on their television screen growing up, on top of that, there is no longer the stigma now of Pac-12 football for Oregon. Now, I will make sure I say this. I love the Pac-12. Rest in peace, Pac-12. I grew up in Pac-12 country. I grew up going and watching USC play UCLA. I grew up watching Oregon State and Oregon. Like, those were all big games in my household, all right? So I want to make sure we say that. But at the exact same time, if you're a recruit with an NFL mindset, and you say, I want to go play against the very best in the country, the Pac-12 really hasn't been the place to get that done. You think about the SEC, you think about the Big Ten. Well, Oregon not going to the Big Ten, I think that provides a little bit more confidence for these kids in the future that, okay, if I go to Oregon, I'm going to play against the best, I'm going to have a great filter to run my tape through for scouts, and I can accomplish all my goals and then some. You still got the geographical part of things that's an obstacle for Oregon, but with how they're built in the modern era and they're moving to the Big Ten, expanding their brand even further, I think that's a tremendous, tremendous asset for them when it comes to recruiting. So can they be the number one ranked class in the country in the future? I don't know, but it's definitely more possible now than it ever was previously. Also worth noting, the Nick Saban ripple effect, man. We've felt it from the coaching carousel to the transfer portal. I'm not so sure we're not going to see that in the recruiting rankings here in the near future. Alabama, the number 2 class in 2024, but like, what happens when Kalen DeBoer has to recruit his own class? I'm just saying, I don't know if that means Alabama moves from the top 2, but I do think it provides a little bit more variance across the college football landscape and a few more recruits that maybe were saying, hey, I'm going to play for Nick Saban no matter what, and now they're going into their senior year, going into their junior year and saying, well, we'll see about Alabama. And just the only thought of we'll see just cracks that door open for some other schools like in Oregon to get in the mix and acquire some top talent. So I think it's very possible. I'm not calling my shot, I'm not predicting anything, but I do think with modern college football and with how Dan Lanning operates and runs his program, which obviously we have our own program here, I think it's very much so on the table for Oregon, more than it ever has been before. So Oregon, man, I'm telling you, they are built for modern college football. A lot of these schools, from Oregon to Missouri, heck, Colorado even, and this is not a Colorado segment we're about to jump into, Tennessee, Florida State, we'll talk about here in a second. They understand what it is to be successful in modern college football and what you have to do. And I think Oregon is built to do those things. So I got another one of you that hit me up. Nate, I think it's Nate FSU, says, what is the ceiling and floor for Florida State with DJ Uiagalelei? Now, if you want to get at me on Twitter, it's at JD Piquel. Shoot me a question on there. And I think it's a fair question because last season for Florida State, it was magical, right? It was magical up until, I guess, it wasn't. When you won the ACC regular season undefeated, probably feel like you should have been in the college football playoff. But now Jordan Travis has gone to the NFL. Rehab looks like it's going well, by the way, so we're excited for that. DJ Uiagalelei enters into the fray as your starting quarterback. Now, I will say this. I think a lot of people have a strong opinion on DJU. Whether it's positive or negative, you probably have your opinion on DJU. And I think the people that would say negative things about DJU would point to his time at Clemson and say, well, look at how he didn't play well in the ACC. Look at what he didn't do there. I would just say this, and we've said this a couple times, but I'll rephrase it again. DJ Uiagalelei, I don't know if he was the solution at Clemson, but he definitely wasn't the only problem at Clemson. And that was early on in his career. Like DJU left Clemson, and Clemson's offense got worse. Okay? DJU went to Oregon State. Oregon State still scored right around 30 points a game. And so I think the big question you have to ask if you're Florida State when you talk about ceiling versus floor, what do you get from DJU in terms of his maturation since being at Clemson and now coming back to the ACC? And the other question you have to ask is, what do you do around DJU? Because listen, we love Jordan Travis. We think Jordan Travis is a dog. All right, we're big fans of his. But I would also say, like, what made Florida State so good last year, yes, Jordan Travis elevated his game, but does Florida State go undefeated if Keon Coleman doesn't transfer into Florida State? I'm not saying Keon Coleman is the end-all, be-all, and that's going to change the trajectory of Florida State football in 2024. But I do think that what you put around Jordan Travis elevated his game. That's why we love college football. It's the greatest team sport in the world. There's no way around it. So my question then is, what do you ask DJU to do and who with? Is Malik Benson going to elevate his game and be a version of what Keon Coleman was? Because I think from a skill set perspective, DJ Uiagalelei, what he brings to the table, a different player than Jordan Travis, but I think he brings a similar level of tools to the table. And that's not me saying they're the same player. I'm just saying you can still call design quarterback runs. You can still push the ball vertical. I think Jordan Travis and his development as a quarterback, I think he really found his stride there towards the end of his time at Florida State. But when he was early at Florida State, like he was going to Mike Norvell's office and saying, hey, I don't know if I should keep playing quarterback. Should I go play wide receiver? And Mike Norvell was like, hey, listen, calm down. We're going to get you, we're going to get you where you need to be. Just stay at it. DJU and his journey to Florida State and what he's had to endure, I think, one, makes him extremely mentally tough, just from the outside looking in, that's how I feel about it. Two, I think Mike Norvell and his track record with quarterbacks is not something we should gloss over. Like, I would not be surprised in the slightest if we saw DJU enter into the ACC with bad intentions, and that combo of him with Mike Norvell and the chip this Florida State team probably has on their shoulder based on last season's events, I could see that being a really, really great marriage. So to answer your question, ceiling and floor for Florida State, I think ceiling, you look at the ACC, and I have a hard time picking a favorite. Like, maybe you talk about Florida State because of what they did a season ago and who Mike Norvell is. Maybe you like Miami. Maybe you think Clemson's going to bounce back. Maybe you're talking about another team in the ACC being a dark horse. We just talked about Virginia Tech a second ago. The bottom line, I feel like the ACC is pretty wide open. Like, I don't think there's a game that you just automatically chalk up for Florida State and say, that's a loss. I don't see that on the schedule of Florida State in ACC play. So you look at non-conference play. Notre Dame, we'll see what they are with Riley Leonard. I'm still transparently a little bit wait and see on what he's going to be within that system. I think it'll complement him, but I still have my reservations about Riley Leonard. It is what it is. You talk about a school like Florida. Who knows what they're going to be in 2024? A lot of pressure out there. Graham Mertz, can he take that next step? Eugene Wilson is a stick of dynamite. I love watching him play football, but like, what is Florida? So I think, for me, when I look at the ceiling for Florida State, it's not a prediction, but I don't think it's unrealistic to say undefeated is probably the ceiling. Now, what is the floor for them? Again, that goes back to what does DJU bring to the table and who around DJU is able to help him. I think the floor for Florida State, I'd probably put, as we sit here in early February, somewhere around 8-4. And that's assuming that they struggle offensively and that the defense is taking a massive step back with who they lost. A lot is going to make sense here as we get into that first month of the season. Not saying we'll know who Florida State is, but I think we'll have a better gauge for what they have personnel-wise. But I would just make sure we say this as we move on to our next segment. DJU, if you ask him to win all the games for you, that's not going to be who Florida State wants to be. Like, if you tell DJU to put on the cape and wheel you to a undefeated season, that's not the formula. It's not the formula. So a lot of it is going to be around DJU and how much they support him and how successful they are because of that. So if you're thinking it's just purely a DJU question and answer, I don't think that's the case. But I do think from a tool standpoint, he has what you need to be successful. If they can be dynamic offensively, they can be balanced offensively through the air, he can be consistent throwing the football, good things are going to happen. But then you talk about what's going on defense, what's going on with the skill players. Something to watch for. Something to watch for without question. Appreciate everybody tuned in live. Little thumbs up button under the picture. If you could hit that and get us up to 100, that'd be phenomenal. And we appreciate you in advance for that. Appreciate you in advance for that. Man, this is crazy. So this is our last segment here in this studio. And we'll have a sappy moment here in a moment after we get to this. But another one of y'all reached out to me and said, what are 3 games that you could, or excuse me, I'll rephrase that. What are some games that you could see being played 3 times in 2024? Now, for those of y'all wondering what this question is referring to, we have a lot of conferences next year, from the SEC to the Big Ten, ACC, that have no divisions. No divisions. So with that being the case, teams that play in the regular season, we could see play for a second time in their conference title game. I think that's great. I think that's a good thing overall to have the 2 best teams playing for the conference. We could probably all agree on. The Big 12 also divisionless, I believe. But then on top of that, we have a 12-team playoff. So you have a very real possibility now of teams playing 3 times in one season, which a little bit unorthodox in college football, but that's where we are right now, and it could make for some great matchups. Now, I have a couple listed here. This is not an all-encompassing list, just some that came to mind as we kind of put the segment together. And the first one is Alabama at Georgia. Or Bama, Georgia, Alabama, I guess we're going to get September 28th. But Bama and Georgia playing each other in the regular season. The last time we saw this in the regular season was in 2020. We could see it in the regular season, which we will see. We could also see a rematch in the SEC title game if Jalen Milroe and Kalen DeBoer and them end up working out how they want to work out, and Georgia is who we believe they are. And then you see them in the college football playoff. Like, this would just feel so bizarre to me because we usually only see this in the SEC title game. Again, 2020 was the last time these teams played in the regular season. And even that was a bizarre season to begin with. So we haven't really seen these 2 teams play in the regular season in a hot minute in a normal context. So that's one that I think we absolutely will see. All of it, to me, just comes down to how much Kalen DeBoer can put it together in year 1. Can you put it together in year 1? Because you got a lot of talent, but it's one thing to have talent, another thing to put it together and have it work in your contraption of a system. Contraption is the wrong word to use. To have the mechanism of the team all work how you want it to work. Because the offense will look different. No way around it. The defense will look different. I think Georgia, quite frankly, will be in the SEC title game. We'll talk more about those when we get to our predictions. But the bottom line, seeing that 3 times feels like a possibility. Now, we got Oregon and Ohio State. Not playing non-conference, playing in conference in the Big Ten. With those 2 teams being in the same conference next year, that's absolutely wild. This, to me, feels like potentially the most likely three-game series we could get. October 12th in Eugene is when they'll play. I think they'll both be, I don't want to say undefeated, but I think they'll both be in pretty good shape at that point in the year. And then I think that them playing for the Big Ten championship, again, feels like if you asked me to pick a Big Ten championship game today, I'd probably put these 2 teams in there. And then one of them, obviously, will have a bye by nature of them winning the Big Ten. And I think the other will be a very much so competitor for one of those at-large spots. Would be surprised if neither of them were in the college. I'll be surprised if we don't have a college football playoff that doesn't include both these teams. I'm just fascinated to see what Ohio State looks like with Will Howard playing quarterback, because all the ingredients are there. They're going to have a top 10, top 5, top 3 defense next year. Brought a lot of dudes back, and oh, by the way, you sprinkle in the best safety in the country for my money in Caleb Downs. And then you got Jeremiah Smith, the probably all-everything true freshman you expect for Ohio State next year. Was our number 1 player in the 2024 class. He's going to be a stud. Will Howard, I think, is going to be a stud. I'm interested to see how they look in that offense. Interested to see if Bill O'Brien is calling the offense in the future. Quinshon Judkins obviously is a dog. Like, you go down the list here, there's so many good personnel pieces for Ohio State. Just curious to see how they all mesh, because that is a factor. Then Oregon, kind of the same song, second verse. Like, Dylan Gabriel, as experienced as there is in the game, how does he fit in this new offense? Not so much how does he fit, but I would say a better way to put that is how long does it take for him to acclimate to this new offense? Curious to see. Michigan and Ohio State is another one that we could see 3 times. And this is weird because typically a rivalry game, like, you get it once and it's sweet, and you get it one time out of 365 days and you talk about it for 364 days. And that's kind of what we love about college football. So we could get this game November 30th in Columbus, which we will get it then, but we could also get it the week after in the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis. How weird would that be if we get Ohio State, Michigan, and then Ohio State, Michigan 2 weeks in a row? Hey, I'm not complaining about more presents for Christmas, but I am saying that would be a little bit bizarre. And then if you saw that in the college football playoff, that would be kind of wild. Michigan, we talked about them already, 128th in return to production in 2024. That does not mean they don't have a ton of talent on that roster. Yes, J.J. McCarthy's gone. Yes, you lost your head coach. All those things are true. But what people said about Michigan throughout the entirety of this season from opposing coaches, every single week it felt like people say, yeah, really talented, really well coached, but man, are they deep. Man, I mean, they're 2s and they're 3s. It's hard to tell which kind of unit is out there because they're always playing at the same level. So I don't think Michigan will have this massive step back. Fascinated to see what they do at quarterback. Do they go get somebody in that spring portal window? Is Alex Orji the guy? We're going to find out here soon. That'll have a very big impact on if we see this game 3 times. Because, again, if I had to pick today, I would put Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. Probably would put Oregon in the Big Ten title game. Michigan, we'll see. I want to see about Alex Orji. I don't think that's inappropriate. I don't think that's wrong for me to want to see who's playing quarterback there, all right? So that's our thoughts on that. Last one here, Georgia and Texas. Again, SEC matchup. Weird to say, but it's true. We'll get it October 19th in Austin. 2 teams that I truly believe are in national championship form. Texas, they did well through the portal, obviously, landing guys like Silas Bolden, Isaiah Bond, Amari Niblack. They both have elite coaches. And that shouldn't just be overlooked. Like Steve Sarkisian and Kirby Smart, respectively, I think 2 of the top 3 coaches in college football. Kirby Smart was at number 1 in our college football coach rankings. On this show, at least, Steve Sarkisian was at number 3. Both have all the ingredients to compete for a national championship. I would not be surprised if we saw this in Atlanta in the slightest. Again, if I had to put a conference title game together today, which thank goodness we do not, I'd probably put Georgia and Texas. That would probably be the way that I would lean right now, with reserving our right to change. And then obviously, whoever ends up being second place in the SEC, I think we'll see them absolutely in that college football playoff. So Alabama and Georgia, could see it 3 times. Oregon, Ohio State would be my pick probably for us to see 3 times. Michigan, Ohio State, it'd be weird. It'd be very, very weird. It would be the most modern college football thing ever to see that in back-to-back weeks and then again in the college football playoff. That'd be wild. Georgia, Texas. Feels like we'll see that in the SEC title game if we had to pick today. But again, thank goodness we do not. We reserve our right to change all these picks. But if we were to see that matchup in the SEC championship, I feel like we could get it in the college football playoff because I think both teams will make the playoff. And thankfully, we'll get it in Austin, October 19th. So all games that we could see 3 times. That is not an all-inclusive list, an all-encompassing list. So let me know on Twitter, let me know in the comment section what you think we're going to see here 3 times from a matchup point of view in the 2024 season. That's where we are right now in college football. Wild times. Wild times, but nonetheless, here we are. So let's keep on rolling here. About to get some questions here in just a few short moments. Before we do that, though, I'm going to give you an ad read, and then I want us to kind of eulogize this studio, if you will. So really quickly, Grateful to tell y'all that the hard count is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, here's the thing. This college football season is going to be absolutely electric. It's going to be a season unlike any other that we've ever had. It is going to be high drama, I believe, especially in that November month. It is going to be extremely intense. And the best way to experience college football, we all know this. You can experience it from your couch and watch it on TV, and that's all good. It's all great. But to get the real deal, to get it up close in person and be able to actually interact with it and smell it and in some ways taste it, you got to be in person. The best way to do that is to buy a ticket. Best way to buy a ticket is with Game Time. Game Time is the fast, easy way to buy tickets for all the big-time matchups, especially college football. But if you want to buy some time before we get to the fall and you want to go to a concert, you want to go to a college basketball game, I don't know, whatever you're into and you can buy a ticket for, Game Time, they got you covered. Best tickets, best prices, lowest prices guaranteed. So get exclusive flash deals on tickets on all sports, entertainment events. Nice thing about Game Time, you always know you're getting the best price. If you find a ticket in the same section and row for less than what you paid for, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Also, know before you buy, be able to see the view from your seat before you even purchase the ticket via the feature on their app. So, snag tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code HARDCOUNT for $20 off your first purchase. HARDCOUNT, HARDCOUNT. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code HARDCOUNT for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Game Time, doing the Lord's work, getting the people in the stands and doing it the right way. Okay, about to get y'all questions really quick. But as I mentioned at the top of this show, this is our last live show in this studio. Now, notice I did not say our last live show, period. We're not going anywhere. This, if you consume this content via the podcast feed or via the YouTube channel, you can do that here. But this, for us, just personally, a little bit of a sentimental day. Myself and Nick Brake walked in here for our first video. I want to say it was either June 30th or July 30th of 2022, I suppose it was. 2 college football seasons later, y'all have joined us in droves. This channel had just kind of gotten off the ground right around then, and 150,000, 160,000 subscriptions later, we're about to make a pivot to a new office and to a new studio. So one, thank y'all. Thank y'all for being a part of this show. Thank y'all for allowing us to do this for a job. I was talking to Nick Brake the other day after we finished the signing day show, and I was like, man, I love this. This is just so freaking cool. We get to sit here and talk about something we were going to talk about anyway for a job and get a paycheck every week for it. That's absolutely incredible. And thank you for y'all for elevating this show and elevating this platform and this channel the way that you have by subscribing, by getting in the chat, by telling your friends, by being in the podcast, by following me on Twitter and getting at me and telling me when you disagree with me. Like, thank you for that. Because the communal aspect of this is what makes it special, and the way that y'all have allowed us to elevate since we've started has been nothing short of phenomenal, and something we're extremely grateful for, and something that will, again, 100% continue as we move into a new studio and a new office. But a lot of good memories here, from our first videos to pulling all-nighters to spending New Year's in here. I was in here when the ball dropped, I believe, on 2022 and 2023. Like, I was sat in this office, had a Martinelli's, and it was how I brung in the new year. So just thank you for y'all being a part of this, and wanted to do our last studio show here at least. Schedule will be the same, don't worry about it, but wanted to eulogize that the right way and just thank y'all for all you did for making this studio, making this operation what it is to this point. So enough of that, enough sap. Let's bring in that man, Nick Brake, to kind of break it all down here, no pun intended. What's up, brother? How we living?
Dude, speaking of Game Time, I used Game Time last week for the very first time.
How was it?
It was very nice. I actually used the round table promo code.
Really?
Got my tickets for $4, walked over to Bridgestone, about 15-minute walk down the street, watched the Predators. They lost to Florida Panthers, but it was fun.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's all right. Hey, that's a good time, though. Yeah, easy to use, huh?
Easy to use.
It's a good deal, man.
Yep,
It
absolutely.
won't steer you astray.
Found the best price, guaranteed.
There it is, baby.
Drew asked JD, assuming Bill O'Brien is going to take the BC job, who do you think is likely going to replace him as offensive coordinator at Ohio State?
I don't know. That's such a good question. I've been thinking about that because I don't know who it would be. I wonder if they would pass the sticks back to Ryan Day, and he says, all right, well, I was trying to get rid of this play calling duty, but I guess I'm going to go back to it. I wonder if they say, hey, Brian Hartline, you're going to call plays. No idea. a name that's kind of fun to talk about right now, and I don't know if there's any smoke to it. I kind of doubt there is, but like if you had your wish list, you could go with Chip Kelly. Looks like he wants out of UCLA just based on the jobs he's interviewing for. Hasn't really been bashful about that. He and Ryan Day, both New Hampshire guys. We'll see. That would be very, very fascinating. I think that Ryan Day actually was his quarterback at New Hampshire, so that would be interesting. That'd be a kind of re-meeting of sorts. I don't know. How's that for an answer? I have no idea, but we'll track that and obviously have thoughts for you as soon as that does become a reality and we get a better gauge for who could be in the market for that job.
He's there for a good time, not a long time if he leaves.
Good time,
like
not
Kingsbury
a long time.
At USC.
Yes, yeah. I mean, maybe Chip Kelly just pops up as an analyst and just says, here, I'll break down tape for a minute, and then I'm going to go to the NFL next year. Like, that could be, I mean, heck, that could be something he could do. How demoralizing would that be for UCLA if your head coach leaves to be an analyst? I don't think that's going to happen, but
wow,
if he really is taking the NFL route, that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Don't really know what's going on there, but who knows? King Epic. I haven't seen King Epic for a while. Says, JD, aside from Oregon and Texas, what other teams moving to a new conference do you think could be an immediate conference contender?
Outside of Oregon and who? Texas?
Texas, yeah. Those are two pretty obvious
Immediate
ones.
conference contender. Man, Utah in the Big 12, I think we've talked about a fair amount, Nick. Like, that's one that makes a ton of sense to me. I could see Arizona being a conference contender in the Big 12. The Big 12 is fascinating just because it feels so wide open. Now, SMU to the ACC, if we want to get real exotic with it, that could be one. But I probably would say Utah is the team that I would probably peg as a conference favorite for us early on in the new Big 12 for Utah.
Yeah, I was going to say Utah.
Those are your guys. You like Utah.
Yeah, because OG Gary out here is talking about Utah all the time.
I love it.
Ended up learning about them. Speaking of OG Gary, can we start counting the term the Battle of the O for Ohio State versus Oregon?
Ooh, I don't hate that at all. Battle of the O. Yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun once we get like some rivalries with these teams down the road, and we get like the Ohio State and USC rivalry becoming a thing, or Michigan and Oregon, or like you said, Oregon, Ohio State. Like once those develop some rivalry names, we should probably start workshopping a few just so we have it ready.
Yeah,
like that. I think that's gonna be a lot of fun. I can't wait for that.
What do you say we get into a little bit of NIL talk, Jay?
Let's do it, man.
Let's do questions. First from Andrew
wildly.
Holland, which is a perfect combination of my two favorite Spider-Mans, Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland. Says, JD, is NIL cap not the answer to a lot of these issues? It would level the recruiting field and get good recruits to where they know 100% they want to be, which could prevent crazy transfer numbers. So, JD, do you think that the cap isn't the right call, or do you think maybe it could be?
I see the logic there. My thing is like, I'm all for NIL being a factor in recruiting. And maybe that'll get some pushback, but like, I'm all for it. And especially for these schools that show that they care about college football. Like Missouri's a great example. Get a $62 million donation. Missouri clearly cares about college football. They're like, hey, we are prioritizing our football team. Here's some money. More than ever before, your, again, care factor, which is a verb, I keep saying verb, a verbiage that we're using with NIL today and overall just modern college football, your care factor is able to impact your on-field product more than ever before with having solid NIL, with having great resources, all those things. So I'm honestly for no cap. I think no cap is always the best policy, Nick. No cap, and that's how we feel about it.
Dude, I am getting absolutely roasted in the chat right now for not putting Tobey Maguire in my favorites of Spider-Man. I'm sorry, guys. Look, I was born in 1999. I'm a 2000s kid. I grew up watching the other guys.
Well, I mean, you're actually a 90s kid if you're 1999.
Yeah, technically. Well, look, the Amazing Spider-Man movies stink, but he's a good Spider-Man. Also, agree with Ferris Khan. He says the Spider-Verse movies are really good. Okay. They are really good. Let's get back to college football, JD. Jake Hewlett says, JD, Joe Klatz says that the NCAA needs to acknowledge that players should be an independent contract employee in order to play for schools. Do you agree that should be the direction heading forward?
It's tricky to navigate that stuff because there's so much with like the legal jargon and things that I'm 100% just not like not all the way privy to certain aspects of that. So I would say like my stance on NIL has kind of been the same as it was before. Pay the players. Players are to be paid. NIL, just like any other tool in college football, can be abused. And so the right format and structure for that's important, but I think absolutely you should pay the players and find a way to make that work in the best interests of all parties involved. So I do think that there's something to be said for the independent contract side of things, but I think my stance is the same regardless.
Dude, Andrew Holland says that he's kind of gets annoyed that Tom Holland is repping the same name as him. Well, maybe we can change it. Emma Stone, her name was Emily Stone. She changed it, so maybe we can get Tom Holland to change his name.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe they're brothers. I don't know.
Maybe.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, well, by the way, Andrew Holland, if I remember correctly, has been getting the people going, trying to get people to like the show, so I do appreciate it.
There we go.
A lot.
There we go.
So shout out to Andrew. We got a question from The Truth. It says, JD, when Ryan Day loses to Michigan again, by the way, The Truth is a big Michigan fan, does he get fired or do the excuses line up again? In quotes, we're going to hang 100 on them. Ryan Day about Michigan before 2020.
Man, I have such a hard time. I understand the frustration. Like losing to your rival, especially in college football, like it's not allowed, unacceptable. And if you do it too many times in a row, we have problems. So does he get fired? That to me would feel like an overreaction. And so I think how I feel about it and how the people in Columbus feel about it may not totally match up. How I feel about it is you got a top 5 coach in college football, and I think he's still evolving as a head coach. So my other question to that would be, if you do want to fire Ryan Day, who are you going after that's going to be just ultimately the better choice right away? Who is the answer that's going to flip things in your favor and you're going to beat Michigan the next year? Like, feels a little bit like a reach to me. I'm not in favor of that. I think he should stay, and I think they should continue to be patient with him until there's a bunch of other losses that pile up against teams that aren't Michigan. And to be real now, that could happen with teams like Oregon joining the conference. We'll see what USC is in the conference in the next couple of years. Like, it's not out of the question that competition getting more stiff could be a negative thing for those teams at the top of the conference, and maybe they have to, I say negative thing, it could be a more difficult thing for them to achieve the standard they have in-house, but I would have a hard time firing Ryan Day, even if they lost to Michigan again. But there would be some uncomfortable conversations. I do believe that too.
Gee, this is just my 2 cents. Wouldn't Michigan fans, if they think Ryan Day's the reason that they're losing to Michigan, wouldn't they want him to keep his job?
I've seen that.
I see these Michigan fans, because I did work for the Wolverine too, all of them in the chat, want him to get fired so bad. I'm like, but why?
I think it really is this tug and pull between you want your rival to feel pain. You want someone to feel pain of, wow, we had to fire a head coach because he couldn't beat us.
I can see that, yeah.
But then also you're like, well, no, if we keep beating them and we think he's a reason why we're beating them, then we want him to stay. So it's just this total rock and hard place for Michigan. But I'm sure they're happy to be in that spot right now with the way they played against Ohio State the last couple of years and the fact they got a national title trophy to their name for it. So,
yep.
What do you say? One more, Nick?
Can we do like 2 more in speed round fashion?
All right, let's do it.
Because I've got 2 more questions. Actually, there's a lot more, but
let's do it.
Ferris Khan says, JD, what do you think about Wink Martindale? You know who that is? DC for the Giants in Baltimore. I know you're not an NFL guy, but he's interviewing for the Michigan job today for defensive
Okay, I think the NFL pedigree is always a good move.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a positive move overall.
Okay, sounds good. We got one from Gilmore. Says, do you think the strength of the schedule should be considered if Napier has a bad season this year? That's something you've
100%.
preached, JD.
Yeah, man. 100. I mean, the context. Like a 5-7 record in the SEC is very different than elsewhere in college football. So I'm not saying that he's going to go 5-7 next season, but like we got to kind of grade it on a curve a little bit and understand what he inherited, and then also how difficult the path is. So nobody's, feeling sorry for Billy Napier, but I do think like we have to sort of treat this with the proper context. So, yeah, that absolutely should be considered without question.
JD, I want to see how you interpret this question here. Thomas says, will the P2 form this summer and separate from NCAA? So I'm assuming he means the new big guys in the Big Ten and the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, will they separate from the NCAA? I think I would be surprised if that ended up happening this summer. I do think we're starting to see a little bit more of a schism developing, like a little bit of that crack in the rock. And it hasn't totally broken apart just yet, but we're slowly but surely starting to see that divide become more defined. I don't think it's a this summer kind of thing. I do think it is an eventually kind of thing. I'd be surprised if we didn't eventually get those, the college football as a whole separating from the NCAA. That feels like it's going to happen at some point. But this summer, I think that crack still has a little bit more it needs to develop for that to be the case.
JD, what do you say we end off with our resident Nebraska fan, Jonathan?
Love it.
Says, which team do you think will surprise us all in the 12-team playoff?
Which team will surprise us all in the 12-team playoff?
Who could be a surprise team, basically?
Heck, let's dance with the one that brung us, Nick. I think Ole Miss. I don't even know if they're a surprise team. I think Ole Miss is just poised to do some damage this year. Now, what that looks like, we're going to find out. But all the tools they have in-house are there. 2, they no longer have to win the SEC to find their way into the college football playoff and have a chance. Like, Ole Miss was as hot a team as there was in the country last year, I believe, at the end of the year. The way they took care of Penn State should not be ignored. I don't care who opted in and out of that game. Lane Kiffin's coming for blood this year. So this is all in this year for Ole Miss, and I'm excited to see what they do in that 12-team playoff. I think it'll cater exactly to the teams like them.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Hey, Nick, next time we do this, man, new studio, new office, a lot of new things. Closer to you, though. Closer to your
I was going to say, I'm a little selfish. I got to drive out of the city and back in every day here to come to work. I'm pretty excited to just, have a 10-minute drive.
That's beautiful.
Work in Nashville, live there, so it'll be nice.
Sorry
for you, though. You got to travel a little further.
Yeah, hey, you when you love something, you make sacrifices,
Yeah, I guess so.
We love
That's
this.
True.
We love this. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
That's that man.
Take care.
Appreciate you. Next time we see Nick break, it'll be at the new studio. We appreciate y'all again for all that you bring to this show, all that you are when it comes to making this show what it is. We're grateful for y'all. We love y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling. When we see y'all, it'll be at the new studio, but we will see y'all nonetheless next time.